Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, April 14th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, 6 killed by U.S. bombing of Yemen factory. So Yemen's Sabah news agency has reported that U.S. airstrikes hit a ceramic factory in Yemen's Sana'a province and killed at least 6 people. The initial report said that 3 airstrikes hit this factory on Sunday night. Dr. Anis al-Asbahi, a spokesman for the Yemeni health ministry, wrote on X early Monday morning, Yemen time, that at least 6 people were killed and 30 were wounded. According to a Google translation of his post, he said that Yemen's health ministry, quote, condemns and denounces in the strongest terms the blatant American aggression against our country, Yemen, and its targeting with direct bombing of civilian objects and civilians, end quote. He said that most of the victims of the strike were, quote, civilians working in the factory, the houses, and the farm next to it. Among the wounded were 5 children and a woman. Asbahi continued, quote, the crime is added to the criminal record of the American Zionist enemy. It is a full-fledged war crime and a flagrant violation of all international laws and conventions, end quote. So 2 U.S. airstrikes were also reported in the Al-Jawf province on Sunday night. Since March 15th, U.S. airstrikes have pounded Houthi-controlled Yemen, which is where 80% of Yemenis live, on a daily basis. And the U.S. airstrikes have failed to deter the Houthis, who have been firing missiles at Israel, shooting down U.S. drones, launching attacks on U.S. warships. And, the reason why I want to make this the top story, obviously, this is big news, the U.S. bombing another country and killing what it looks like civilians there. But just the fact that this bombing campaign is just getting virtually no attention. And, the only media coverage, like write-ups I see of it in Western media, is very brief, very vague. I mean, this is a brief story here, but hopefully we'll get some more details on this strike tomorrow. But it's just barely getting any attention, and the Pentagon's not putting out any information about their airstrikes, what they're claiming to target here. Just no transparency at all when it comes to this war. All right, so the next one here, the Houthis shoot down a 4th U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone within 2 weeks. So Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree announced on Sunday night that Yemeni air defenses shot down another U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone, the 4th that's been shot down within 2 weeks. He said, quote, by the grace and help of God Almighty, our air defenses succeeded in shooting down a hostile American MQ-9 drone while it was carrying out hostile missions in the airspace of Hajj Governorate. End quote. So the Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, they claim to have shot down 19 American MQ-9 Reaper drones since October 2023. So if that number is correct, which I think it is, I mean, the U.S. doesn't confirm really when these drones get shot down, but usually like Pentagon officials speaking to the media anonymously will confirm it. And it does look like, based on, from following this for the past year and a half, that they've really shot down 19 American drones. And these are MQ-9 Reaper drones that they use for surveillance, and they also carry out drone strikes. They're worth $30 million a piece. So losing 19 means that the U.S. has lost over $500 million in these drones. They've lost $570 million worth of Reaper drones. That is big money. So, and of course, the U.S. bombing campaign has failed to deter the Houthis. Saree said in the statement, quote, the armed forces reiterate that their military capabilities have not been affected and that the ongoing American aggression against our country will only bring more disappointment and failure, end quote. Earlier in the day, the Houthis took credit for a missile attack on Israel. According to Israeli media, Israeli air defenses shot down 1 missile, and the other likely fell well short of its target. So they said that they fired 2 missiles. The missiles did trigger air raid sirens and send Israelis to bomb shelters. Sari said that the attacks, quote, successfully achieved their objectives, shutting down Ben Gurion Airport for about an hour, causing panic and confusion among the settlers, forcing millions of them to enter shelters, end quote. So the Houthis have made clear that they will only stop their attacks on Israel if there is a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli blockade on the territory, and Sari reaffirmed that in his statement. So as I covered in the last show, a senior member of Ansar Allah's political bureau has said that the Houthis would stop attacks on U.S. warships if the U.S. stopped bombing Yemen. Trump administration officials have claimed they would stop the airstrikes if the Houthis declared they would stop targeting U.S. ships, but there's no sign that the U.S. is considering this offer, since the bombing campaign is really about trying to protect Israel. That's why the U.S. started this bombing campaign. It wasn't in response to the Houthis attacking U.S. ships. It was in response to the Houthis saying they were going to restart their blockade on Israeli shipping. And the Houthis didn't start attacking U.S. warships again until after the U.S. started bombing Yemen again. So I tried to contact the State Department about this offer from the Houthis for a mutual ceasefire, but the Houthis are saying they will continue to enforce the blockade and attack Israel. So I asked the State Department is this a potential deal that the U.S. could accept, or would the Houthis need to also stop attacking Israel? I asked the National Security Council as well. I don't know if I have the best contact for them. I've never heard back from them, but I gave it a shot. But I haven't heard anything, and I'll probably try again tomorrow with the State Department. All right, so the next one here. Israel bombs Christian hospital on Palm Sunday. So happy Palm Sunday, happy Holy Week to the Christians out there. Early Sunday morning, the Israeli military bombed the Al-Ali Arab Baptist Hospital in Gaza City, putting the medical facility out of service. According to Middle East Eye, Gaza's civil defense said the bombing caused, quote, the destruction of the surgery building and the oxygen generation station for the intensive care units, end quote. The strike damaged other buildings, including the adjoining St. Philip's Church. So it's a Christian-run hospital, and there's a church, in the facility, and the bombing damaged the church. And this is, again, on Palm Sunday, a very big Christian holy day. The civil defense said the strike hit the hospital minutes after the Israeli military ordered the hospital to be evacuated. Eyewitnesses told Middle East Eye that they only had 18 minutes to leave the hospital. At least 3 patients, including a child with head injuries, died as a result of the forced evacuation. The Israeli military took credit for the attack and claimed that it targeted a Hamas command and control center, but offered no evidence. That's just always the claim. Usually when they bomb a place. Although when they bombed, I forget the name of the hospital. It was the hospital in Khan Younis that Feroz Sidwa, the American surgeon, was at. They didn't claim that they targeted a Hamas and command and control center then. They said that they killed a Hamas official, political official, not even a militant, and it was while he was getting treated. But anyway, so this attack on this hospital, and this is an old hospital. It was founded in 1882, so it's much older than the state of Israel. And this attack comes amid severe shortages of medical supplies due to the total Israeli blockade on all goods entering Gaza, which has been imposed since March 2nd. Hospitals have been overwhelmed since Israel fully restarted its genocidal war on March 18th. The Baptist Hospital is managed by the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, which strongly condemned the attack and noted that it occurred on Palm Sunday, the start of the Christian Holy Week that ends on Easter Sunday. This is a photo from the St. Porphyrius Church. This is the Greek Orthodox Church, their Palm Sunday service. The Diocese of Jerusalem said the strike marked the 5th time the hospital was attacked, as the Israeli military has systematically targeted and dismantled medical infrastructure in Gaza. The diocese said, quote, the Diocese of Jerusalem is appalled at the bombing of the hospital now for the 5th time since the beginning of the war in October 2023, and this time on the morning of Palm Sunday, end quote. The Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem also released a statement condemning the Israeli attack. The statement said, quote, this hospital, already strained by months of siege, stood as one of the last beacons of medical hope in Gaza, where dozens of healthcare institutions have been systematically destroyed. The stripping away of such sanctuaries of life and dignity is a tragedy that transcends all boundaries of politics and enters the realm of the sacred, end quote. So in the UK, the Archbishop of York, because this is the church, the Episcopal Church in the Holy Land, this is the Anglican Church. So this is Stephen Cottrell. He's the Archbishop of York in the UK. He said, quote, "For the only Christian hospital in Gaza to be attacked on Palm Sunday is especially appalling. I share in the grief of our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the Diocese of Jerusalem," end quote. So Gaza's small Christian population did celebrate Palm Sunday at the two churches in Gaza City, the Holy Family Parish, which is a Roman Catholic church, and again, the St. Porphyrius Church, which is Greek Orthodox. They're both in Gaza City. They're pretty close to each other. And I saw a lot of pictures of their, procession outside the St. Porphyrius Church and their Palm Sunday Mass, or liturgy as the Orthodox, the Divine Liturgy as the Orthodox call it. I went to Palm Sunday Mass on Sunday morning with my kids, and they were misbehaving, and I was all stressed out. But, then I get home and I start seeing what these people are going through, and they're still celebrating and going to Mass and everything. So I don't have much to complain about. All right, so the next one here, the IDF surrounds Rafah, cuts off Khan Younis. So this one is from the Cradle. The Israeli military announced on April 12th that it had completed the capture of the so-called Morag corridor in the southern Gaza Strip, cutting off the city of Rafah from Khan Younis. So this was on Saturday that the IDF announced this. So again, this is the new corridor they're establishing. They have this plan to turn the city of Rafah into a buffer zone, which means they might level every single building that's in there. But now they had the city surrounded. There's still people in the city. So Rafah is now completely surrounded by the military, with the 36th Division holding the Morag corridor and the Gaza Division operating in the Philadelphia corridor along the Egypt-Gaza border area, the military stated. The 36th Division's 188th Armored Brigade had pushed into the southern axis from the northwest. At the same time, the division's Golani Infantry Brigade entered from the border in the southeast to complete the capture. Israel's buffer zone in southern Gaza will encompass the entire city of Rafah, which has largely been destroyed, and is extended to the outskirts of Khan Younis, an area equal to 20% of the Gaza Strip, so 1/5 of the territory. Israel Katz, Israel defense minister, said on Saturday that the capture of the Morag corridor effectively turns Rafah into an Israeli security zone. And Katz threatened Palestinians, saying that this is their last chance to banish Hamas and release all the hostages, and that saying that if they do not, Israeli operations will spread to most of Gaza's territory. And the Israeli military already controls more than 50% of Gaza's territory, and they're going to create these kill zones. I mean, it's just getting extremely brutal. I mean, obviously, I feel silly sometimes trying to find the wording to describe what's happening in Gaza. I mean, saying it's getting extremely brutal. Obviously, it's been extremely brutal, but things seem to be... obviously, things are just getting worse and worse with the continued bombing, them taking all this territory, forcibly displacing more people, and the blockade ongoing, the shortages and everything. Just getting worse and worse. All right, so the next one here, the UN says 36 Israeli attacks killed only women and children. So this article is from Al Jazeera. So the UN said that Palestinian women and children were the only fatalities in at least 36 Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since mid-March, as it warned that Israel's military offensive threatens Palestinians' continued existence as a group. So this is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She said on Friday that the office has documented 224 Israeli strikes on residential buildings and tents for displaced people in the Gaza Strip between March 18th and April 9th. She said, quote, "In some 36 strikes about which the UN Human Rights Office corroborated information, the fatalities recorded so far were only women and children," end quote. So the findings come as Israel's attacks on Gaza have killed more than 1,500 Palestinians since the Israeli military broke a ceasefire in March, according to figures from the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Then it gets into how, the food, water, and medicine is all running out amid this total blockade. All right, so the next one here, Hezbollah sites handed over to the Lebanese army. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So Hezbollah facilities south of the Litani River under the ceasefire deal that the Hezbollah signed with Israel, that Lebanon and Israel signed. Hezbollah was supposed to withdraw from its military from areas south of the Litani River. Hezbollah said that they've done that, and now they're handing over all these military positions. And they say that, according to a source, a Hezbollah source speaking to the media, they've handed over about 190 out of 265 positions to the Lebanese army, and they've also been handing over positions north of the Litani River. So it looks like they're going through with all this. And I think it seems like there's been some kind of negotiations, or they're trying to get negotiations going to get Israel to withdraw, to give up its occupation of southern Lebanon, those 5 military bases that it's staying in. All right, so the next one here, Kurdish SDF hands key dam to Syrian forces under integration agreement. This is another one from Jason. So the integration agreement between the Syrian government and the Kurdish SDF continues to advance. The head of the SDF met with a delegation over the weekend. And in recent days, the SDF handed partial control of several areas in the Aleppo governorate to the government, and perhaps most significantly have given them effective control of the strategically important Tishreen Dam along the Euphrates River. This is the site of a lot of fighting between the SDF and Turkey and Turkey's proxies, the SNA in northern Syria. And, this is kind of what I expected. If this integration deal works out, I figured the idea was that the Kurds would withdraw from the areas close to Turkey, and that the Arab troops would be sent. That was kind of always the potential deal on the table if the U.S. withdrew from Syria when Assad was still in power, that they would basically integrate with Assad's forces, and that the Arab troops would be deployed to these areas. So that seems to be what the idea is here as well. And of course, this is the HTS-led government in Syria that we're talking about. When we say Syrian government, it's the government led by the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And there's other areas where the SDF has pulled out. So this thing's kind of moving along faster than I expected. But it does seem like the fighting, everything's really calmed down in northern Syria. And this is a good reason for the U.S. to get out of there, to get, there's still 2,000 U.S. troops, as far as we know, 2,000 U.S. troops in eastern Syria. All right, so the next one here. Europe pledges $23 billion in Ukraine military aid. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone. He wrote this on Friday. So there was a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. And this group that has been meeting since, I don't know if they held their first meeting, in right after the Russian invasion, but basically since the Russian invasion in 2022, the U.S. has led this group, and they usually met in Germany, and the U.S. would chair the meetings, and they would come up with military aid for Ukraine and announce all this type of support. But the Trump administration has taken a step back. Their whole thing is they want the Europeans to spend more money. So the U.S. did not attend this summit. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth apparently attended it remotely. This is something, Lloyd Austin, this was like a big deal. He would always go over there and chair this meeting. So again, the U.S. has taken a step back. And the Europeans said that they got 21 billion euros, which is about $23.7 billion. It's mostly coming from the UK and Germany. Germany agreed to send Ukraine $11 billion in military aid over the next 4 years, and the UK will send 4.5 billion pounds. And so, this is the coalition of the willing. Actually, I think that's a separate group. That's what they're calling the group that wants to send troops to Ukraine, the coalition of the willing, even though that reminds everybody of the disastrous Iraq invasion. That's what they want to call themselves for whatever reason. But, we're seeing all this talk about, these European countries about sending troops and continuing this proxy war, it seems like. So, they're determined, it seems like, for now, to keep things going. Although the discussion about troops the idea is that that would be part of a peace deal, but I just don't see Russia going for that. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's really progress being made toward a ceasefire at this point. So the next one here, Ukraine and Russia continue to trade accusations of truce violations. So this one is another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. Russian and Ukrainian officials who gave addresses at separate events in Turkey this weekend said there were ongoing violations of the ceasefire for energy infrastructure agreed to last month. So Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, quote, "The Ukrainians have been attacking us from the very beginning, every passing day, maybe with 2 or 3 exceptions," end quote. And again, he's talking about this idea of a pause on energy infrastructure attacks. And then following Lavrov's remarks, Ukraine's foreign minister argued that Moscow does not want a peace deal as Russia has fired almost 70 missiles, over 2,000 drones, and over 6,000 guided aerial bombs at Ukraine. Saying that they targeted mostly civilians. And then on Sunday, a Russian missile struck Sumy University, killing 31 people. So this is really horrific, this airstrike, Russian missile strike in Sumy, Ukraine. I saw aftermath, all these dead civilians on the street. Looks like, according to Russian media, there was like a military ceremony nearby that they were supposedly targeting, but Russia hasn't put out a statement about it or anything. So there's like some kind of military ceremony, but I mean, it was in the middle of the city. So if you bomb something like that, you're going to kill civilians. But it also looks like one missile just landed on the street, and it was really brutal aftermath. So people just still getting killed in Ukraine, and it's just really horrific that this is going on, and it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. And besides, the Russian strikes on Ukraine, there's the Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia, and then the fighting along the front, lots of soldiers being killed still. U.S. and Russian officials have been meeting. Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, met with Putin again on Friday. It was the third time he met with Putin. And Trump said, Russia's got to start hurrying things up. And basically Russia is saying, this is going to take time. I think it's clear they're not going to just go for like whatever terms the U.S. has offered at this point. And the Ukrainians are still saying they're not going to give up territory. So it just, there's a long way to go. And again, all the fighting and the dying continues. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. and Iran to hold more talks after first round. So it looks like the U.S.-Iran talks actually went pretty well. So the U.S. and Iran are set to hold another round of negotiations on Saturday, April 19th, after indirect talks held over the weekend appeared to go well. Following the negotiations in Oman, both the U.S. and Iran described the engagement as constructive. The U.S. side was led by President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and the Iranian delegation was headed by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The negotiations lasted about 2.5 hours and were mostly held indirectly, with Omani mediators passing messages between each delegation. However, at the end of the talks, Witkoff and Araghchi spoke directly for a few minutes. So both sides kind of got what they wanted. Iran wanted to keep it indirect negotiations because they felt like they weren't getting enough respect from the U.S. They were being, with all the sanctions and military threats. Trump was saying they're going to be direct. So the actual negotiations, it seemed like, were indirect, but then Witkoff and Araghchi actually did speak to each other. During the whole Biden administration, there was never any kind of engagement like this with Iran. They had some indirect talks, didn't really last long, but there was no direct talks like this. The White House said in a statement after the negotiations, quote, "The discussions were very positive and constructive, and the United States deeply thanks the Sultanate of Oman for its support of this initiative," end quote. The White House said that Witkoff's direct communication was a step forward. According to Axios, so this is interesting too, the next round of talks will be held in Rome, so they're moving them to Europe, and the U.S. and Iranian delegations could hold negotiations in the same room, with Omani mediators being present. So that would be much more direct talks if that happens. And Araghchi said in a post on X that the talks were constructive and promising and conducted in an atmosphere of mutual respect. And so again, I mean, it sounds pretty good. And the fact that there's progress means that the U.S. does not seem to be asking for what Netanyahu wants, what they call the Libya model, which would be just total destruction of Iran's nuclear program, completely, including its, it's a civilian nuclear program, and obviously they want to keep it, and Netanyahu and Iran hawks want it completely dismantled. And the other thing that U.S. hawks want is a deal to place limits on Iran's ballistic missiles and Iran's support for its allies in the region. And I don't think Iran would go for anything like that either. So it does seem like, based on what Witkoff has said, he said something, I think it was the day before negotiations, like, we want to see the nuclear program dismantled, but our red line is weaponization. Basically saying that it's the focus is on ensuring that Iran doesn't build nuclear weapons, and that's something Iran is very willing to commit to because they've committed to it before, and they're not building nuclear weapons, as U.S. intelligence has stated. So, it's tough to be optimistic. I was very pessimistic about this whole thing, as you know, if you listen to this show. But again, this seems like it could have gone as good as it could have, considering all the tensions. And that's what Trita Parsi said. So he's an Iran expert, vice president of the Quincy Institute, and he's saying again that he thinks it went as good as possible, and that if the focus is narrow, if it's focused on the nuclear program, on just Iran reducing its uranium enrichment, essentially going back to the JCPOA, which was the deal that Trump, tore up in his first administration. That's what it sounds like they would go toward. So Iran would do that in exchange for sanctions relief. And so we'll see. The problem is that a lot of people are going to try to want to sabotage this. A lot of people in the U.S., in Congress especially, Republicans in Congress, but also within the Trump administration, there's certainly hawks that don't want this to happen. And of course, the Israel factor. If Israel gets uneasy about it, who knows what they could do? They could kill some Iranians somewhere. It's things are still very shaky, but hopefully this means these threats of military action against Iran are going to kind of cool down, and we'll see a focus on negotiations. So again, Saturday is the next round, so we'll see what happens. All right, so the next one here, U.S. troops headed to Panama. So this is something I missed last week. This article's from Responsible Statecraft from Stavrula Pabst. So U.S. troops are now set to deploy near the Panama Canal for military training, exercises, and other activities as per a new joint deal with the Panamanian government. The deal, seen by AFP on Thursday, comes as an apparent concession to President Trump, who has repeatedly threatened to retake the major global trade route from Panama if it failed to reduce or axe fees it charged to American vessels passing through there. And this is something Trump said several times is, we're going to take back the Panama Canal. But now they're making this deal basically where they're going to deploy troops for training. And we'll see what this turns into. But, Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, was hinting recently that the U.S. could reestablish military bases in Panama on the canal. But for now, they have this deal to send troops. This whole thing, I think, is really stupid because it's the allegation that the Chinese control the canal. I mean, there's just no truth to that. It seems it's based on the fact that a company based in Hong Kong owns two ports, one on I think one on either side of the canal, but two ports in Panama. And there's actually a deal in the works to get BlackRock to buy it, and it seemed like that was essentially what Trump was going for here, was just to get an American company to buy it. But there's some problems with that deal. It might not go through for, they're still working it out. But in the meantime, the U.S. is going to send troops as well. So the whole thing is kind of silly, I think. All right, so the last one here, Mahmoud Khalil can be deported, judge rules. So this article is from ZTO. I don't know how to pronounce that. ZETEO is this new media outlet that I think started last year. So anyway, an immigration judge in Louisiana ruled on Friday that Palestinian student protest leader Mahmoud Khalil can be deported on the basis of a letter from Secretary of State Marco Rubio that says he has personally determined Khalil poses an adverse foreign policy consequence to the United States. So it's essentially the judge ruled that he could be deported for his political beliefs because the federal government is saying that he's opposes U.S. foreign policy, essentially. And that's because he opposes the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the genocidal war on Gaza. That's it. That's apparently grounds enough to deport somebody. And this is a green card holder, too. I mean, it's just completely absurd and a total affront to the First Amendment. So the thing is that this doesn't mean he's getting deported right away. He's going to fight it. He's got a lot of lawyers on his side. But what it does mean is he's going to be in this ICE detention center in Louisiana probably for a long time. I mean, this could really drag out. This is going to be like a very high-profile case. And his wife's about to have a baby, so he's not going to be there for that. His wife's an American, and they ripped him away from his family, from his American family, because he's critical of Israel, and that's what this is all about. That's what all the revoking all these visas and everything is about. And it's just, I think it's just a matter of time before they start doing things to American citizens. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Gideon Levy, Goodbye Janine, a symbol of the struggle against Israeli occupation. One from Ted Snyder, Iran is not building a nuclear bomb, a fact sheet. One from Caitlin Johnstone, censorship violates the rights of the speaker and of the hearer. One from Brad Pierce, despite U.S. aid, Somalia's government is as weak as ever. It's over at the American Conservative, a case for, not backing the Somali government anymore. And our spotlight from Ahmad Nawaja, in Masafir Yatta, we need more than awards. So please go check all that out. I hope everyone had a good weekend. And I want to thank everybody again for helping us with our fundraiser recently. Other ways you can help us out is by sharing this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. All that stuff helps. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.